So today I'm going to demo building some virtual machines inside VMware vCenter, and this vCenter is located in this portable lab. This portable lab, that's how it's set up. We've got a couple of Intel NUCs, um, Netgear switch, some power, and some Raspberry Pi 4s that run Kubernetes. So the pair of NUCs are Skull Canyon i7 quad core, 64 gig of RAM, and 2 terabytes SSD. Um, we've got roughly 32 machines on it. I think there's more now. Um, and this is the virtual machine layout inside the vCenter. So we've got what we're going to be using today is Tower Cluster with Ansible Tower Cluster with per Postgres servers and HA proxy. We're going to be using the GitLab server today uh, and the Red Hat satellite. The intention is to build um, an Elastic Stack server and then a web server to pump logs to the Elastic Stack. So we close that, and if we go to the project, so this is the GitLab server inside the Box Lab, and this is the project we're going to be Ansible project we're going to be using today. And if you wanted to run this by hand, you could run Ansible playbook -i for inventory, and this is the host file or the inventory file with the list of the virtual machines we're going to target or create. Then -k and uppercase K, lowercase k and uppercase K for the Ansible user password. So that's an ask password option, and the sudo or privilege escalation password. And we're going to give it -b because we need to escalate privileges and become um, a root user or a privileged user. And the user we're going to connect with is Ansible, and that Ansible user is baked into the VMware template that we're going to use. And then finally, the actual playbook, and that playbook will run and import a number of other playbooks in order to deploy. We can just have a look at the vCenter. This is the vCenter. This is the tower servers we're going to use, and these are the HA proxies that sit in front of them. And we'll be deploying the VMs into this folder that's already created. So what we can do is log into Tower and kick this off before we want to look at the actual code. So within Tower, where we at the command line we were giving a host file or an inventory file, which tells Ansible which machines to target. Within Tower, we can create an inventory. So we've created one ahead in advance. So the name of the inventory is Ansible Deploy Elk VMs Demo. It has a number of hosts. So it's got 2 hosts in it. These were added. They both belong in these groups. And if we were to look at the host, each of them has some variables. So we are telling Ansible that we want to, when we connect to vSphere, we want to deploy into data store 10. We want the guest IP to be this and the guest notes to be elk stack log server 01, and for the web server we're going to the same data store. That's the IP, and we just have some extra notes. So these are host variables that we are creating in advance within Ansible, so that, or within Tower. So whenever Ansible is run, it reads those in and can use them with the VMware module for Ansible. So as well as an inventory, you need a project, and the project we're using is the Ansible deploy elk VMs demo. And what this project is, it's actually this project within GitLab that we then sync to Tower every time we run, and we do a delete and an update revision, so that every time you run it, it deletes the old version of this code and then gets a new sync to make sure that you've got everything up to date. The credentials are that Ansible user that we have baked in to the template. So the username is Ansible, and then we have the template itself. This is what we'll run in order to deploy the VMs and the application. So it has a name. I like to keep it the same as the project. It's using the inventory, which we created here. It's using the credentials, which we created here. It's using the project, which we are syncing. It's a run type. The playbook is, there's a number of playbooks within this project, but the one we actually need is stand up, and we need to enable privilege escalation. So that's the template. What I will do is take the show changes off, because that makes the screen less noisy. And we'll run that. So we're about to launch this playbook, and we should see it deploying VMs. So if we have a look over here, it's just deployed these two VMs, and we should see them boot. So we should see them boot. And now the playbook is waiting for the systems to come up so that it can connect. There we go, it just connected, and we now start to see the playbooks run. So let's have a look at what we're actually doing here. So stand up is the playbook that we're running, and it's running deploy VMs. It then runs Ansible prereqs. That just sets up the template with some additional configuration to allow us to execute the rest of the plays. And then we deploy the Catalog agent. The Catalog is like Catalog is the upstream of Red Hat Satellite 6, so that's where we get all our CentOS RPMs, etc. from, and where we mirror the Elastic Stack repos as well. Then we go, and here we use the elk logs playbook, which builds the Elastic Stack server, and then elk webs, which builds the Nginx server that we're going to use to send the logs to the Elastic Stack. So if we go back and look at the deploy VMs, whilst this is running, we can look at the deploy VMs playbook. Now, deploy VMs only uses two modules. One module, which is the VMware guest module, and that wants to. So what it requires is this section here is information about that we need for the actual vCenter. So the deploy vCenter host. So that's my vCenter, which is vsphere.local, and then username for the vSphere user that is able to has the permissions to create VMs. Then the deploy vSphere password. Then the data center that we're going to, which is DC in a box, and the folder that we're going to be deploying. Then it wants to know about disk, networks, hardware, customization, and of course these are all placeholders for Ansible variables. This is Jinja 2 templating, so we can look at the vars files. So these are where all the variables and are stored for each of the plays or the playbooks. So as we can see here, deploy vSphere host, that's our local, this is our user password, most used ASX password in the world, I believe. DC in a box is our dem, and then we're going to deploy to this folder. This is the cluster, and then this gives us some information about the options for the guest, the network, the net mask, DNS server, the domain, the guest ID, the template we're going to use, how big the disks are, and the disk type, and how many CPUs. We've got 4 gigs of RAM there as well. So this is running in the background still. So that's deploying our server and configuring it. And we can now go back to look at what's in the next playbook. So that's the Ansible prereqs. Nothing interesting in there. Nothing much interesting in there. That's the deploy Catello agent. Again, that's just deploying an agent and registering against the satellite server. So let's have a look at the elk logs. So the elk logs, what we've got here is I've actually used the some demo playbooks and rules that were written by Jeff Geerling, who's like the most prolific writer on Ansible on the planet, I think, and he is the author of DevOps for Ansible, and the elk stack example is available within this book. So that's the example I've used just to set this up. I've had to do quite a bit of modification to it because the environment that I want to deploy into is not, it doesn't have internet access, so a lot of the sort of Python modules and RPMs and stuff, a lot of things within Jeff's demo example, of course, because this is used for people, trying it out on their own laptop, etc. It expects internet access, so I've had to do quite a bit of modifications. I've also introduced a couple of my own roles, like I've created a role for the audit beat agent, and then I had to bring in one of Jeff's Ansible Nginx role for the demo web server, and then I've got a role for PHP sysinfo. So while this is still carrying on, we can then look at the next role. So if we look at our elk log server, it runs, all it does is it points to the variables file, which gives us some information about how to configure the actual elk stack, and then it calls each of these roles for the elk server. Then whenever we finally get onto running the elk web, that deploys again, reads in the vars file, and then runs the Ansible role nginx master, the PHP, installs the Galengai file beat, then the PHP sysinfo application, and then my very simple audit beat role, and that should be it. So at the minute we are still running on the elk log server. And what I'll probably do is skip past this section to the end, because this can take up to 12 minutes and we're currently on 8 minutes. So I'll fast forward through this to the point which it's deployed. So that's completed now. We should have 2 servers up and running. So let's have a look. Got our web server running PHP sysinfo. Just gives some information about the web server that it's running on, number of processors, how much memory. So it's a little simple PHP script or application. So if we generate some logs, maybe some error logs. Okay, so we're just going to say blah here. And then we can look at the elk server itself. So this is a new server. So we'll have to dismiss the privacy statement, etc. Then we can look at the logs. Oh, before we do that, let's jump on the actual. Let's jump on the web server. As the Ansible user. And the SSH key will have changed, or the SSH host key will have changed, because we've just built this new server afresh, and of course I've been demoing it and testing it out. So what we need to do is remove the SSH key that it had previously for that server, and then try again. And we'll get a couple of others because the IP address is also recording. So get the password right. So what we can do is switch to a user, a non-privileged user. Switch to the user Colin. Nobody trusts that user, so nobody gives them any privileges. And then we can try and do a few things. Let's try and reboot the server. We can't do that because we don't have. Let's try a few times, and then let's try and restart Nginx. Okay, and we put a wrong password in. Do that a few times. And let's try and sue you to the Ansible user. Do that again. Wrong password every time. And now we can have a look at the logs. So the elk logs, we should have some entries. So we can see that we are connecting to the elk server itself. And also we should be connecting to we should see the Nginx logs from the web server, but we're obviously using the best operating system and browser combination on the planet. But we can actually look for our logs. So we typed in blah there a few times. It's not caps it. And we can see our PHP info blah. So that was logged. Now let's have a look at so that's the standard log. Let's have a look at seam. So this is the inbuilt elk seam. We can look at some events. So we've had 3 failures, 1 user authentications with 1 success. It's me logging as Ansible, and then we've had 3 failures. We got 6 IPs, 15 destinations. Let's look what's actually going on here. So we can search for Colin. Let's see. So Colin on Elk Web. This is my sue you. I tried to sue you to Ansible. Process stopped. So that's our block. And that's that. So that's using Ansible Tower, Ansible, GitLab to deploy a vCenter, deploy some VMs on vCenter and stand up an elk stack. All right, thank you very much.